Asteroid of fear.
What is up, everyone? Richard, a Men of the House podcast here. And on this episode, I just kind of wanted to make you guys aware that we did have some technical difficulties in this episode. So you may hear it where it seems like it skips from one part to another. I had to cut out a little piece where we had to reboot the internet, but regardless, it doesn't make the conversation any less valuable. It was a great conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to Marcus and would definitely talk with him again. And yeah, it's like sometimes these things happen. We can't control them. I think there was some construction or something, and he's in the Bahamas, and it's the equivalent of having a good meal outside, and it starts to rain. Doesn't make the food any less tasty. It's just a little minor inconvenience you got to work around. So, and maybe part of your taco got wet. I don't know. Either way, um, yeah, it's just a heads up. And also, I always hit record in the beginning just in case anything profound is said. And on that note, I did leave it rolling prior to the intro because he asked me a question and he talked a little bit and I thought the content was good. And that's what we're about here is the content. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode with myself and Marcus Aurelius Higgs.
I apologize for my lateness. I had to hard restart my computer and I've been having this network problem.
Oh, no worries. All right, let's see. Make sure I'm recording. Okay. All right. I have a general outline. Typically what I do is I make a small introduction. I don't do like a detailed one because I'll ask you about your background, which allows you kind of to explain that. And let me see. Blah, 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 blah. My mind was doing two things at
Take your
once because
time.
I thought you weren't
Take your
going to
time.
show, and so I was telling my wife something.
No, I was take a breath to reset because I was rushing myself. I'm like,
All right. Here we go.
we're good. We're good.
Yeah, so I do that, and I have kind of like your general outline, but I think this will be perfect, and I think it'll be kind of typically I'll do like, hey, introduce yourself, kind of what led you to this point, um, to be in this arena that you're in. Was there a catalyst, a tipping point that said, hey, this is what I should be doing? And then usually towards the end, I'll ask something like, as a result of um, doing this, kind of deciding to go into this career field or make this your passion, what is something that's happened that you never would have imagined, that's been like a positive, a value add to your life had you not taken the step for this journey? But I have a 10-year-old too, so I think this is going to be an easy conversation. I'm going to get to learn a lot, and so I'm excited about it.
Hey, I'm looking forward to that, Richard.
For the show up framework. Oh, because I have my ideas about how parenting is, and hard, very hard.
Could you could very hard. Could you give me a brief overview? And I know it'll emerge during our conversation,
Mhm.
but just some basic, I say principles, but just some guidelines of your parenting approach.
Um,
And I respect the wisdom of all parents because I know you. Oh man,
really try to
let
build
me know if this
trust.
network gets
Okay.
funky. Yeah, yeah. Go on. Try to build
Just
trust.
yeah, building trust. It's like a long-term game, I feel like, and building trust is kind of the issue because I want my daughter to be able to come to me for anything, regardless if it's good or bad. Because if we have the truth and right information, then we can make the best decision on moving forward. So I think that, and then, you know, um, teaching them how to be good people, I guess. We're raising humans.
Yeah.
So our future leaders, and I feel like a lot is lost, if that makes sense. It's
Um,
programming. It's kind
it,
of
it makes
programming from
some sense,
years.
but uh-huh.
Yeah,
Programming from
programming from
your,
years and years and years of different people, and um, meaning that, in school they focus on stuff, and they're not focusing on teaching kids how to, like, let's say, self-regulate their emotions and some of these soft skills that you need when you go out into the world. And, if kids don't have stability at home and the only stability they have is at school, but all they're learning is what's mandated by a state test, then, they end up with no skills. Then they have to learn the hard way or go into therapy and learn at a later age, or, somebody like myself have problems follow you around for 30 years. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Let's jump into the
All
conversation. This
right.
is going to be a,
All
and
right.
thanks for that. Thanks for that. So you know what? And just because I asked it of you, I'll
Hmm.
offer just a brief of what my approach.
Okay.
Um, all growth begins with stress. And I love what one parent told me. He said, I don't want my kids to have a better life than I have. I want them to manage stress better than I did.
Oh, I love that.
And because stress, if it's chronic, if it's unexpected and it's unmanageable, that's where we get ACEs or adverse childhood experiences. So,
Hmm.
how do we introduce stress into their life where they know they can manage it, where they know it's predictable, where they know, oh, I'm growing because of this? And that's growth mindset. But it's being intentional on creating this stress in their life where they know they can come to us for that support
Yeah.
and for that nurturing. And the reason we have this specific 18 years that I work with, it's because that's when they're exploring their identity and they need to be pushed away to figure this out for themselves. But they know they can come back, as you said, to a source that's true,
Yeah.
to a source that does have their well being in mind. And here's the rub. I mean, we've all been teenagers if you made it this far, but there's misunderstanding
Yes.
and and misunderstanding is inherent in all communication. But how do you maintain that trust through the misunderstanding so that they know you are a source that's reliable, a trusted advisor? So, yeah.
Yeah. Sounds perfect. All right. Here we go. Hmm. Welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And on today's episode, I got Marcus Aurelius Higgs, and we're going to talk about some show up framework as it relates to preteen parenting. And I'm really excited about this conversation because I have a preteen. I have a daughter that's 10, and I feel like the the stressors of parenting are daily. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And, right before I made the intro, we were talking about um, parenting styles and some advice you had heard. And, you mentioned you want your kids to be able to manage stress better than you did versus, let's say, having a better life than you did. And that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks because I think that's that put into words what it is I'm trying to accomplish. And I think about it like when I think about the podcast and having started a podcast, and let's
Mhm.
say being as transparent and authentic as possible and vulnerable. Part of that is that my daughter will always have a place to come and hear that authenticity, that vulnerability, but it's kind of to avoid some of the errors I made. But we all know that they're going to make their own errors. And even if they're not the same ones, they're going to have to learn to work through them. And we talked about stress and growth and, purposely putting stress. And, as adults, I think if you're kind of growth oriented, you understand the principle of kind of doing hard things. Like I just took up jogging again, because it is hard and because it's going to require effort. And I know I'll grow from that. But you had mentioned part of it is how we introduce stress into children's lives and preteens specifically, and so they know that they're growing, and that we, there's like this framework of like, self-assigning something that's difficult, completing it, and then giving yourself credit for it so you can build some self-worth. And so, yeah, it all kind of
Yeah.
ties together. But let's start off by give us a little bit of your background and kind of how you ended up in this arena, how we ended up face to face. What got you passionate about this?
Hey, it's great to be here, Richard. Just meeting you more now that we're on the
Yeah.
podcast. But yeah, it feels warm at home, and that's what it is, eh? Men in the home. Um, so how did I get here? I'm a third culture kid, and just for the audience who doesn't know, that means your passport doesn't necessarily match that of your parents or the country you grew up in, which you identify with. It has many different meanings, but my
Mhm.
mom is from the Philippines, my dad is from the Bahamas, and I was born in California, Riverside. And I grew up in the Bahamas when my parents divorced at 12. I also grew up in Alabama sometime. I studied communication or journalism in university at Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama. Straightway went to be a missionary
Mhm.
inside South Korea for 5.5 years. During that time, I say my understanding of the divine expanded, and it's still a very strong part of my life, but yet um, I'm not necessarily, I have no animosity towards the church, but it's just
Right.
organized religion. I sought something
It's
bigger,
kind of it's kind
something
of
bigger
like
sought me.
it's kind of like corporate in a
Um,
way. Yeah, it
yeah,
reminds me
yeah,
of a
I
corporate
guess.
job. Like, hey,
Um,
it doesn't start off bad. It starts off with good intention, but once it gets too big, it gets further
sure.
away from the actual meaning of it.
Mm, mm. And growing up, I felt the divine was a sincere part of my life. Spoken word and poetry, my expression and being seen by something bigger than me created meaning in my life. And I still have that. And that's what has kept me through all these years. Went to Saudi Arabia, worked some time there, went to Spain, went to Thailand, studied in all these places, well, taught in all these places. I was a high school English teacher.
Mhm.
I'm now back in the Bahamas with my aging parents. These are the conversations I would have in parent-teacher meetings.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers said, if you want to help the kids, support the parents. I'm interested in this, and this book behind me is a book that my fifth graders gave me. So I
Hmm.
taught grade 12, grade 9, and fifth grade. And the idea is to stay in the game long enough that they might use the same principles with their kids. And really, what I do is human development, but for a specific age where I could have the most leverage. Because it sounds cheesy, but I do love people, and
Hmm.
I don't love your kid as much as you do.
Right.
So that's that's why I do what I do, to be an advocate for kids, to speak to younger me and my father, connecting the dots at that time in my life, to look forward to me and my kids, plan on having a family and so on. Yeah. And that's why I do what I do. There's so many threads, so many places, but
Yeah,
I really do feel divinely called to this.
I love that. I love the point of what you said about, you know, it's interesting because after being laid off from healthcare, and now I do podcasting and Uber Eats and kind of more of a stay-at-home dad. I'm also a caretaker, but I adhere to a very
Mhm.
flexible schedule. And
Yeah.
this flexibility allows me to be the father I want to be, that I was never able to be in corporate, because you have to be somewhere these hours, you're always on call. And um nobody's going to take care of my kid the way I do when she's sick. And I can do that, and I can stay home. And so when you said that, hey, yes, it's true. You're not going to love our kids more than we do. And that support of the parents really stuck out, like being able to support those who do have that ultimate love for their children. And so I just thought that was kind of a brilliant statement in there. I really liked that.
One thing I'd like to interject here, there's a book called The Magic of Caregiving. And I was reading about it. Two things. One is, so I have a podcast I'm starting with my friend. It's called Young Man, You Are Loved.
Hmm.
And it speaks about spiritual, wholesome masculinity, right? And we usually don't equate masculinity with nurturing. Whereas I think they don't have to be separate.
Right.
They're not polar opposites necessarily, but you can have masculine nurturing. And um, the point I'm making is sometimes we don't see men as caregivers because what
Right.
caregiving does is it's asking you to support something outside of yourself that you're not being paid for, that you need support from. However, man, so many connections to be made here. The growing epidemic amongst men of loneliness, I think, is stemming from that idea that caregiving is not seen as part of our identity.
Right.
But when you learn how to give of yourself for something that's larger than yours, expecting nothing in return, you said something interesting. You said it's the hardest thing and it's the most meaningful thing. Meaning is gained when you see something bigger than yourself and you see yourself as a part of it, right?
Right.
And that only comes from parenting. People who are single oftentimes don't understand that, but it's making space for others while still holding your identity and understanding where the rub and the difficulty is. That's where the meaning is created. So kudos to you, much support of being in a caregiving role, showing up as you do. That's the name of the framework, but I just wanted to interject that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Well, let's talk about showing up and kind of where this starts, because I know a lot of the audience is, 28 to 44. There's definitely parents in the group. It's a mix, almost down the middle of male and female. So I think we all have a lot to learn. And, I've mentioned it on other episodes, but as I was kind of telling you before, my parenting style was kind of playing the long game and building trust, because I want my daughter to be able to come to me regardless of how good or how bad something may be, because I believe with truth and accuracy, we can then make best decisions how to move forward, because I know she's going to make her own mistakes, regardless of how much I either try to prevent them or warn her. And part of that is through the podcast. But I lost my train of thought for a minute. I don't
You're
know
all
why.
good. You're all good. You
Um,
said I'll follow your lead, but you're saying where the show framework starts, or do you want to go on trust, or
yeah, well,
yeah.
okay, yeah. I want to go for that. I want to know about the show up framework, but I was kind of more explaining mine,
Mhm.
because that way people can look at comparisons, or take pieces. But yeah, most people
Yeah.
have heard me say
Yeah.
it's like playing chess. It's the long-term game. Because I want
Mm.
for her, a lot of kids are hesitant to go to parents. And for whatever reason, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what it is. And, I
I
never
could share
want
some
that
insights.
to be. Yeah. So, that's kind of what I'm trying to prevent is, I want me or my wife, I want us to be the first place that she comes,
Yeah.
not the last place.
Yeah. I can tell you this much. We can want it. We can set it up for expectations. We really don't know what we can set intentions
Right.
and work towards those intentions. And then the future, the one thing that's constant, my name of my company is Certain Future. The only thing that's certain is change.
Right.
How do we see that change as opportunity? Because she may or may not go down that trajectory. However, you can be very intentional, and that's why I do work with preteens. But I don't work with preteens, I work with parents of preteens. It's beautiful that you said trust. I really do think that's going to be the currency of the future, especially in the age of AI.
Mm-hmm.
Learning to trust yourself. That's what confidence is. Confidere is the Latin, with the trust, with the fidelity. And we learn to trust ourselves by, as we're moving from dependent into independence, I say masculine energy pushes us off or creates a separation as the child is also seeking independence.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that separation, but it's that understanding that in this separation, it's because you're still seen, you're supported, you're loved, you're soothed, and so on. And you're learning to do it from a distance because I'm creating in you now that confidence and trust in yourself. Now, if we study healthy attachment theory, we've laid some foundation work, as Gabor Mate says, hold your child close,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yet when they're growing up, you're not their manager anymore. You're not setting their play dates and everything. You're slowly shifting into the guide on the side, the coaching role. And what coaches do say, I'm putting you in the game, you got this. You can come to me for some insight, yeah, but you're in the game now. And it's where that shift happens, this transition, that stress happens.
Hmm.
New stories are formed, right? And how can we be intentional with our communication to form empowering stories in that stress, right? Um, it's funny when you look at Carol Dweck's work, a growth mindset and a fixed mindset looks the same until you get punched in the mouth. And then you really understand. That's the mix Mike Tyson and Carol Dweck,
Yeah.
if you will. But then you know really where the mindset is. And hey, let's be gracious. They're starting out in the game. Like this is their first stressor, their first major transition.
Hmm.
But as a man who's had a child, who's started a business, who's had a job loss, you know you figure out who you are when life stresses you. Life asks you, who are
Yeah.
you?
Oh, it's taken me years
And
and it was hard.
hey, you're speaking to the audience, eh? You're preaching to the choir. So we're trying to instill at a young age identity. It's man, I'm all over the place, but I feel you're getting something from this. But
Hmm.
the three stressors that they have, or the three, I call it wall of ice. It's ICE. One is
Hold on one second.
breaking.
Actually, go ahead and repeat that. The
So
Wi-Fi jacked up for a minute.
they're breaking their identity of what it means to be a child and then what it
Hmm.
means to be an adolescent. So I call it the three stressors or the wall of us into adolescence or pre-adolescence. That's a bigger
Hmm.
stressor that's constantly through our life. The second one is collaborative mistrust. So they're looking at who they can trust because they
Right.
know I got to figure out who I am, but they feel judged when they look to us sometimes. If, again, they're starting out with, they're not skilled in communication or in their emotional management and so on. So they're like, they don't know what it means to be an adult, of how to fall on your face and get back up if we've not been intentional on teaching that,
Right.
right? So it's collaborative mistrust, and that's why they latch on to friends during this age of they're trying to find who's like me going through this and who's scared crapless like me, right?
Yeah.
um, Ideally, there are other adults, trusted adults inside their lives, coaches, other our friends, caregivers, parents, and so on. So ICE, E is emotional management. Emotions play roles in that. They tell us about our internal state of how safe we are and how we're moving towards our desires as it relates to the outside world. So making sense of their emotions that they're going on inside and making sense of what's up in here. They don't know how to make sense of that yet. So that's why there's this cacophony and this whole cocktail of BS, of bad stuff going on
Yeah. Oh, I love
inside
that.
your child's mind.
That's a good
Well,
one.
it's how do you alchemize that into something beautiful?
Hmm.
And if we teach them that skill at this age, we're setting them up for other transitions in life, you know? And that's why S in the show up framework is it starts with a strong identity. Yeah.
Man. Yeah. And it's so crucial. Like I think kind of like um as you're going through some of this, I can think about my own life and, as kids going like, we think adults are full of it, especially our parents. And then we kind of don't trust anyone. And then we're getting information from, and I was a child of the 80s, so it's magazines, TV, and there's the punk movement and skateboarding, so very
Yeah.
anti-authoritative type stuff. And then, you know, and I've been kind of talking about this, and I think two interviews ago, I did an interview with a gentleman who works with children also, and we kind of, discussed this. And I think, what you were saying about kind of this preteen and this 10-year-old time frame is when I feel like we should be teaching this stuff in school because like I graduated high school year early at 16 and joined the Navy at 17. Um, And so while I was
Okay.
academically gifted and kind of felt mature by doing that early, I was not emotionally anywhere where I should have been. And it's a lot of it has to do because, I mean, we're more aware. There's more awareness in the world now, I think, just as much as
Yeah,
there
I agree.
is less awareness. But mental health, parenting, and all these things are coming to light and how important it is. And, like I said in that interview, 2 interviews ago, was like, I don't know why we're not teaching this stuff in school. We're constantly bombarding them with things that they need to pass the test to fund the schools according to the state. But we're not, those are things. Things can be learned and forgotten. We're not teaching them about themselves. We're not teaching them um, how to make these transitions because had I had some of, let's say, these teachings, whether it be from my parents or in a formal academic setting, if these were part of the requirements to get out of high school, then, I might have made that transition a little more successful. I might have made less or maybe just different errors. But I can tell there's these stages of where I've had stress, um,
Mhm.
run away, kind of regroup, gather yourself, some growth, stress, and but it all started with had I learned some basic fundamental things, I think, when I was 9 or 10 years old.
Yo, this is Hunter from the Everything's Connected podcast. I'm so glad you tuned in. Did you know that this podcast, as well as my own, are part of a much larger community called the Podcast Connection Network? We have some pretty awesome shows hosted by some even more amazing souls, just waiting to be discovered. If you're curious, head on over to the link in the description below. You will not be disappointed.
That these transitions would have been perhaps less rocky, or I would have been able better to deal with them. However, part of me going through all that is now we're at a different level of awareness in the world. And these experiences are what offer the value in telling the world, hey, this is maybe things we should consider moving forward, of arming our children
Yeah.
with these things and maybe starting to teach this and focus. Math and science are important, and so is reading, but we need to balance a little more.
Yeah. So much there. Yes. First, let me let me say that. So that's why I do the work that I do. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, let's look to the future for a moment. I really do think with AI and technology, technology just speeds up the flow of consciousness. It just
Right.
speeds up what a message is, right? The pen used to be technology, books used to be technology, this screen, what we're doing, right?
Hmm.
In speeding up the flow of technology, if we, uh, that math and arithmetic and all that other, let's say, hard education, the 3 R's, it's going to take care of itself. It's going to give us more time to figure out what it means to be human. And of course, like I said, I don't know what the future holds. However, that's what I'm skating towards, like Rain Betsy said.
That
I'm going
is
to where the puck is.
that's the benefit of AI. Maybe if there is
It's gonna
one.
free up. It's gonna free up so much. Well, I think because Sam Altman was working on UBI
Hmm.
long before, because he knew what disruption is going to bring about. And I'm not hoping for it, but
Right.
I really do think it's going to free up a lot of time for us to figure out who am I, which is what life is asking. Now
Because
that said,
it happens either way, and it's how we choose to view it or capitalize on it that matters.
when I say change happens in the future, you could either see it as a problem or you could see
Hmm.
it as an opportunity.
Either you use
You get to
AI to
choose.
cheat your
You're the
way
creative.
through, or you use AI as a tool, like you said, to kind of free up. I mean, I love Writer for writing episode descriptions for the podcast. And that's
Mhm.
something that gives me time back to put into the podcast accountability stuff, parenting, being a husband, and all that, because I'm not sitting there having to
Yep.
do that. But yeah,
Yeah.
until then, I never really made that connection of how it frees up the time so we can figure out these things that we consider important.
A great book is by Dan Martell's Buy Your Time Back, because
Mhm.
the reason we're here is to live a fulfilled life, I think.
Right.
And in living a fulfilled life, we add value back to the collective.
Agreed.
And if we add enough value back to the collective, we have technology where it could be disconnected from our time and attention. That means giving more time and attention to making sure our kids feel seen, soothed, safe, and secure.
Being present.
Being present with them. Hey, the power of presence, right?
Being present with yourself,
Um,
even.
Hey, so watch this. The reason I do the work I do is I work with the parents, and really what it is, it's transformational coaching with the thing that's most relevant to them. In conscious
Mhm.
parenting, we say, it's not the thing, it's how you relate to the thing. And really, kids are there to rub you the wrong way for you to understand who is Richard. Who am I? Like when I was in the classroom, they used to do some stuff, and I was just like, what the? And I'm like, Marcus, why is this rising up in you? What
Yeah.
is this? What really, who are you now? Like, what is
So you were saying that in class, sometimes the kids would you were talking about rubbing the wrong way, and I was thinking, I was like, when my daughter irritates me, a lot of times it's because she does the same exact things that I do that irritate myself. And so I'm seeing her, I'm seeing myself. And I don't know if that's I don't know if it's alarming or if it's more of a I feel like a connection and understanding. And when when my wife and I sometimes discuss maybe how we want to parent, I feel like I have this deeper level of understanding because I see so much of myself in her.
you know what? This is for you to figure out. I
Yeah.
respect your wisdom. I will give you a Rumi quote that says, if we avoid everything that rubs us the wrong way, however will we be polished?
Oh,
Um,
man.
it's
You got all the good stuff today. All the stuff I needed to hear because I'm telling you, some days are so tough. I would say out of all the things I worry about the most, parenting, how my daughter will turn out, all those things are at the top of my uh I would priority or
yeah,
concern.
yeah,
Um but we were talking too, we were saying something about um how I picked up in some of your questions there was this you time to help
yeah.
preteens develop this skill and talking about, some of the things that rub you the wrong way. It's worth taking a look at and kind of how some of the things you do for yourself um, really are indirectly to be a better parent to show it for your child. But kind of explain this you time um,
Yeah.
and how parents use it.
So U time in the framework is, excuse me, it is quality time. However, there are a few, not rules, but an approach to quality time.
Hmm.
Um, it's not necessarily the quantity of time, but it's rather how you use it. And again, you want your kid to be seen. And when I say seen, it is, hey, this is what I'm feeling on the inside. Help me make sense of that. And in making sense of it, it's not going to be 100% sure, but maybe this is what it means and where it's leading. And when they know they can come to you and it's just like, oh, yeah, I feel seen by this older person who's gone the journey before,
Hmm.
they'll start to actually learn those skills of how to see themselves and how to make sense of themselves. Right. And what U time is, it's specific time set aside that's reg- regulated, very, very small, even 5 minutes.
Hmm.
Could be 5 minutes before bed, could be a 20-minute walk once a week around the block. You get to choose, you know? It could be, hey, we prepare dinner together in an activity on every Wednesday and every Friday. It's something that you know is on the calendar of which your child has your full and undivided attention, right? Um, and in that time, it can be child-led. And what I mean by that is your child can say, hey, this is what I want to get off my chest towards you, or this is what I want to talk about. And even if they don't want to talk, it's just like, you have this block set aside for you because you're worthy of my attention.
Oh,
And what I liken it to is you make time for the things you care about. Care about your
yeah.
wife. You set out a date night. If
Mhm.
you believe in higher powers, greater force, you bookend your days in the morning or in the evening.
Mhm.
You're making those little, we can go where you want to go. Where do you want to go? Because sometimes they don't want to open up. And then that's the balance of adolescence. It's
Yeah.
how much do I trust you with? How much do I not trust you with? But you show up at that time.
Mm.
And again, it's creating quality time in their life, not necessarily quantity of time. Because,
Yeah.
hey, we do live busy lives, but we want to communicate also, you are worthy of this time in my life.
I like that. I like the kind of predefining the time. I mean, I had
Yeah.
the other day it was, you know, kind of I had to explain like my daughter and some of her friends, they auditioned for a play and some of them didn't make it. And even though they made it the year before and she still has
Yeah.
one act play, but I can remember, before not knowing the result and then finding it out and then having to explain like, hey, look, daddy understands what it feels like to miss the mark sometimes. And just because it's not now doesn't mean never, and just because it's not this door doesn't mean that there's not a better door. um, but also, I understood there was this kind of feeling down, and I said, hey, look, you know daddy loves you, daddy understands, and daddy's trying to give you the opportunity to, you're allowed to be upset, but then we got to move forward a little bit. And I'm offering you like a feel good, something like, if you want to go, if you want a crumble cookie or something, we can do whatever you want to do. And she was very resistant at first. And then, of course, as we got closer, it was like, hey, what flavors of cookies do they have this week? And a little bit of opening up. And, you know, eventually I got the result, kind of the best result possible that I wanted, her opening up, her accepting some of that, feeling like she understood what I was saying, that, hey, it's not the end of the world and we try. But I definitely, given that experience 2 days ago and now talking to you today, it's, opened my eyes to kind of seeing this, having, whether it's a 10 or 15-minute block once a week, twice a week, whatever is good for you and your family, um,
Mhm.
that or that your child knows that they can be whoever they need to be in that time. Because I told her, I was like, hey, I'll cover my ears. If you just need to scream at the top of your lungs for a second, I'll do it. Because
Yeah.
sometimes I think people need that, and it's
Yeah.
that emotion. And, I think I don't know, I heard on a podcast somewhere of like, don't devalue, especially when a child is like, I feel a certain way. And an adult will say, hey, there's no reason to feel that way. Like, look, you have
Mhm.
food, shelter, all these things going for you. And I tried to remember,
Validate for them.
not to be like that. It's like,
Yeah.
look, you feel this way. Tell me why, or let's figure out why and let's work through it. But, that's kind of one of those things of, I definitely try not to devalue what they feel, because it's their feeling and it's valid to them, regardless if we understand it as parents or not. You know, our job is to figure out why and to
Yeah.
offer support, so they can work through
And
it.
yeah,
So yeah, it's
yeah, you're absolutely right. I know a framework. So there's a part where it's open up communication.
Mhm.
A framework that I use is ABC. You accept what they're expressing. So
Yes.
it's active listening, you're listening to what they're saying. And then B, you build upon it. And when building upon it, you actually give them other reasons why. But again, I'm not sure, maybe this is what it is.
Right.
And then C, you challenge it with curiosity or a question, a curious question. Hey, could it mean this also? Or could
Yeah.
it mean this within them? In life happens and we give it meaning. And you're helping them choose an empowered meaning towards what it means.
Yeah.
You don't invalidate what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, yeah? It's like,
Right.
yeah, no, I see that. I understand what you're saying. Could I share another perspective with you? Or could it also mean this? I'm just curious. And it's not curious to challenge them. You could be speaking out into the ether, just be like, you know, and here's another communication just key. It's just, I remember when this happened to me, making
Oh,
it relevant to them. Don't ever like bring up a story that's irrelevant, but you tie it to what they're experiencing. And again, this is us being a wise adult inside their life, or as Angela Duckworth calls it, a psychologically wise adult in their life.
what do you think of um being open or admitting to your child, I don't know the answer, or I don't have it figured out, but I'm here for you?
Yeah. If you came to a trusted advisor and they tried to tell you that they had it figured out, but you get from them that they don't, you wouldn't trust them. And the thing is, if I tell you I don't have it figured out, I feel more secure if you say, I'll try to figure it out with you, or I'll try to find that answer because I have access to more resources. Um, I understand why. That's one of the greatest feelings. I understand why you feel like this, and I'm here to stand with you as we figure this out.
Yeah.
I understand why the internet might be spotty, and thank you for standing with me as we figure this out.
Um, what what's what's been the greatest reward of doing the work you do? Do you have a example or a story, something that kind of maybe some work you did and it filled your cup, or you got the feedback that this is what you should be doing?
Remember, I was at a wedding,
Mhm.
and my friend Ben, he had his daughter in his lap. She was about 6 then or something. He said, "I like the stuff that you put out online. But why are you doing it? Like, what's it for?" And I saw him and I said his daughter's name. And I said, if you can have a healthy attachment with her based on the stuff that I put out there, and we never even meet, like that's creating healthy relationships. There's this phrase, I got quotes in my pockets for days, but a nation is made great by men who plant trees for the shade they'll never see.
Cool.
And the podcast that I'm doing, Young Man, You Are Loved, I'm doing it with my college friend, and I'm his godson's parents. And the whole idea, just like what you said, it's to encapsulate something that his kid can watch later on, of just like, this is what I was thinking of you. This is what I was going through. In the short run, just other people understanding their relationships better. That feels good. If you could leave here, and I know this sounds cheesy, but I'll own it. But if you could leave here and put something into action and be like, okay, yeah, now I feel better about this with my 10-year-old. That's awesome. In the long run, I'm understanding more so about me.
Mm-hmm.
Life is asking us, who are you? I understand myself as I do this work. And I'm also I'm helping my friend understand himself and his kids and their relationship. And this is a long, long, long run. Like I said, I'm in it for these kids when they do this stuff with their kids. Because all this stuff, it stays true no matter where you go. Like, it stays true. This is
Yeah.
a truism, I believe. It's
Did you think
relationships. That's
did you think you would be doing this when you were when you were going to college? I mean,
I tell you this. So I have a poem. I said it starts with identity. I have a poem called I Am. And it says, I am a messenger, sanctified to speak with a divine voice and know it was not of my own choice, rather. So it goes on and on and on, right? Did I know I was going to be doing this? Simple answer, no. The dots connect themselves looking back. That's what Steve Jobs said. I traveled the world. I got to experience people in different languages. I start to notice where they overlap. I start to learn about what it means to be human. I came out of English class one time and I said, this feels like therapy. I told my chairperson,
yeah.
this feels like therapy sometimes. And he said, Marcus, that's why it's called the humanities. We're teaching them to be human.
Oh,
And if I could see myself playing an infinite game, the infinite game is knowing thyself. That he said, know thyself and you'll understand the secrets of gods and men. Like I talk about characters with kids. So no, I didn't. But then as I started to do other stuff, I'm like, this is what I want to do. So I'm choosing what I want.
mm. Yeah, it's mine has kind of been the same way in terms of like when you look back and it was once I was able to kind of forgive like being laid off and whatnot, and I was like, oh, I spent 6 years interviewing people for jobs, for nurses, for doctors and front desk, and now I have all these amazing interview skills. I have P&L and all this stuff to start a business, run a business. I'm like, and yeah, I sounds like you had some pretty, not that I didn't have wise professors. Maybe I don't remember a lot of it, or maybe my education was so far back ago that I don't remember, but there's definitely some great wisdom in there, especially about the humanities.
Mm.
And sometimes I think business people and tech people don't explain, like parents, they don't teach, like they go, oh, go do this because this is what makes money. um, when we forget that a lot of what we're here doing is about the human experience and teaching people to be better humans. And because if we're better humans, then all the other stuff that we put our hands and attention on, be it science, math, technology, is better. Because I think intention matters. And if we set humans up with the right intention, the right framework, the right mindset, then that's how we affect the world in a more positive place or positive way, I guess you could say. Um, yeah, but do you have any questions for me before we hop off?
Hey, but yeah, yes, and let's see. What has been, oh man, thank you for being gracious with this Wi-Fi. What has been one of the biggest lessons you've learned while parenting? And just to be specific, coming into this, coming into 10 years old. Like what are one of them? Not the biggest, but what is one of the bigger lessons you've learned about life, about yourself?
Uh,
And sit with it
you
for a moment.
gotta, yeah, I think that I want to say, call it like a priming the brain. I know there's a lot of psychology and different things that talk about stages of development, um, brain development, when people are able to accept things. But I think sometimes one of the mistakes we make is discounting um, kids' brains and saying, they won't understand it. They're just kids. There's no point in explaining it, or they don't need to hear this. They'll never get it. Maybe it's too adult for them. We're raising humans. We're not, you're not always raising a kid. Um, and kind of the way it goes, kind of like a thought, or,
Mhm.
what you mentioned about planting trees for shade that you'll never see. When you're parenting or explaining in the present, it's really about what you're going to see down the road. Kind of the moment has passed. And so for me, it's always been kind of this authenticity, transparency, and building trust by being honest. And that's not by having this mindset of, well, she's only 8 or she's only 9. I shouldn't tell her that. And, you know, kind of, what comes to mind was I interviewed a gentleman whose 16-year-old daughter unalived herself. And,
Yeah.
I can remember I was in here working on the episode or something. And, my daughter asked me who that was and asked me a question, and I told her the answer. And that was the moment. And it was because of that conversation with him that I had kind of decided that being truthful and honest, playing the long term and building that long term relationship was what I was going for. And it started right there with telling her the truth about what I was working on and the gentleman I had interviewed, and that, she was 16 and she hung herself, and that, hey, if you ever need to come and talk to me, I'm here no matter what. And that was, and that's why I say that interview was super impactful. And even when my daughter's disagreeable, I know that he would give anything for one more moment for his daughter to come to him with something. And so I always think of that, and I always go, that's why I play the trust long-term game. And that's kind of what I've learned, and that's what I keep at the forefront as my why I'm authentic, transparent, and truthful with my daughter, regardless if she was 9 or 10 or whatever.
Is keep it real, being age appropriate, but always real, because you're making deposits into that trust bank that accrues over time.
Yeah.
And you really don't know where it's going to go, but she knows Pops will always keep it real with her.
Yeah. And I don't know, there's no guidebooks. Well, there's some, but the thing is as we evolve, information evolves, how evolves. And so, do I know I'm doing the right thing? I pray, I journal, I read my Bible, like a daily passage, kind of for inspiration or to keep myself aligned to some sort of principles and value. And I trust that this is my truth. This is what I wish maybe I had growing up. And so this is why. And part of it comes through that interview and the experience. And I'm just going to trust it and go with it, and we'll see,
Trust yourself. Yeah.
we will see. But, the thing is, hey, there's some intentionality and deliberacy behind it, and there's a why behind it. And I feel like it's a very good why. Doesn't make it right, but it's mine and it's for me. And, everybody has their truths according to the life that they lived. And, but I'm also, I try to be as open as possible, because given all the mistakes I've made, I understand I'm not the expert in really anything. And if there's a better way to do it, I'm open.
Hey, hold on. You're the expert in Richard Craft. You're crafting your life. There's a pun in there. You are the expert in you, and nobody knows you better. You don't know yourself fully, and you're figuring yourself out. But nobody knows you better than you. So what I say is there's no greater privilege than to be who you are. Because as life is asking you, who are you? You are asking you, who am I?
Yeah. Man. I definitely, we'll have to hook back up again for another conversation. I really enjoyed this, and, I'll
through the ups and downs. Thank you.
Yeah. But, on that note, I'm going to go spend some time parenting.
Hey,
all right.
The etymology of the word parenting means to bring forth. So,
I didn't
do
know
that.
Well, awesome, man. I appreciate the conversation, and I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I hope you get your Wi-Fi worked out.
Thanks, Richard.
All right, man.
It's been wonderful.
All right. Bye-bye. Well, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. Remember, go out and be the person that you want to meet.
Asteroid of